So this is... What am I actually missing? Yeah, I need a lot more. I don't have anywhere near vials because I'm missing... I have no Diamond Masters, I've only got one Skullfane, and I've only got 2 Holy Lightning Birds, and those are all very vital cards. So rather than like entering the deck edit screen, I'll just kind of go through the cards as I go. So this is like the kind of main Haven deck, and it's built around the new card Diamond Master. This is kind of like the core of the deck, but also not. But it is a core, like, I suppose it's kind of built around a package, but Bejeweled Shrine's probably a better example of a core part of the deck, really. So, Bejeweled Shrine's a fairly simple thing. It's a one play point amulet that has no countdown, so it sticks around. Countdown is just a timer, so that ticks down every turn, and every turn it ticks down, and once it hits 0, the amulet is destroyed. And Havencraft's like... Havencraft has a lot of countdown amulets, and they're all built around... It's all built around countdown amulets that like do something when they're destroyed. But Bejeweled Shrine is not one of them. So when you play it, you draw a card, which is pretty good for a for that it always draws you a card. And then if it sees any other Bejeweled Shrines in play, you banish it, so you can't double up on them. You can only have one Bejeweled Shrine in play, unless you have some really weird way of like cheating another one in, but I don't think there's one in rotation right now. And it can't be destroyed by effects. That was a buff they added later, so that mostly... Yeah, so the Bejeweled Shrine is built around... is based on the set that's made around the anime, so one of the characters would have definitely been using this kind of deck. That's what the archetype is based on. It's based on the anime that they built it. So there's a main conceit of... Yeah, I understood what you were going for. But yeah, it is an anime character deck. It's one of the only ones that's actually like made it properly as a meta deck. The other ones have kind of fallen down. So they might buff them up a bit more, might print some more support. So I think Chess Rune's pretty close. But anyway, I'm trying to make this a bit... I'll focus mostly on Havencraft because I'm trying to make this shorter so that when I put the highlight on YouTube, it'll be under an hour. That's my goal. So I'm looking at the timer. I want to make sure I finish this before an hour and 20 passed, basically. But yeah, so the deck's built around Bejeweled Shrine essentially, and yeah, so when you play it, you draw a card, which is nice. And you can only have one in play, but so you'll play more just to... You'll play more just to draw cards, essentially, just to cycle them out of your hand, because you don't need more than one in play, and so it's just like an extra thing you do. So what the main thing the deck does when an allied follower is making followers who have both Storm and Ward, because whenever an allied follower with Storm and Ward attacks, give it +1/+1. You've played at least... So you're adding a lot of damage if you can get a lot of followers in play with Storm and Ward, and especially over several turns, because of course this is going to be sticking around. It can't be destroyed. There's only one card in the game that can banish... Well, not one card in the game, one card in the current rotation that banishes amulets, which is Spiritual Blow from... which is also a Havencraft card. So you're only going to have to worry about Spiritual Blow, like... against Control Haven, really, because this deck won't run it. But yeah, so the two things that this deck does is it wants to give, like, play followers with Storm and Ward and give followers Storm and Ward. It's got a few effects. I'll go through the effects that do that in a minute. To get +1/+1. And also it wants to... There's a lot of cards that have this second condition, which is if you've played at least 5 cards using their Crystallize effect, which is written here, if you do not have enough play points to play a card, it may be played as an amulet instead for the Crystallize cost. And only the Crystallize effects will activate for a card played that way. So the deck is built around trying to get to at least those 5 Crystallizers very quickly, so that it gives this +1/+3 instead of +1/+1. It doesn't give you any more offensive power, but it does make your board a lot harder to deal with and can snowball very quickly. course, that's every time it attacks. So when if something attacks one turn, it gets buffed, it gets the HP buff, it's now harder for your opponent to deal with, then your opponent cannot, then your opponent can't really, kill it, and then it gets to attack again, and it just keeps getting bigger. And can be a problem. So that's how one of those ways the deck snowballs. So that's kind of like the core of the deck, is you want a Bejeweled Shrine in play and you want followers with Storm and Ward in play, and you've got a few ways to kind of get that. I see this deck even runs Spiritual. This does run Spiritual Blow, which banishes an allied card but banishes an enemy card. But that's any card, so that can hit amulets or followers. There's no other different card types really. But so that's mostly probably, I'd imagine that's run for the mirror situation so that you can remove your opponent's Bejeweled Shrines. So in that case, you'd probably want to keep any additional Bejeweled Shrines in your hand rather than playing them for the cycle. If you're playing in the mirror, if you're playing another Havencraft deck, because they can actually get rid of your Bejeweled Shrines. So like the next kind of cornerstone of the card is Wingy Chirpy Gemstone, which has fanfare, which is simply a play point 1/1 on fanfare, gives ward to all allied followers with 2 attack or less. This does include itself, because it's only a 1 attack follower. Then, if you've played at least 5 cards using the Crystallize effects, this match gives them Storm. So this is kind of like one of your main ways of giving your followers Storm and Ward, so that they get the synergy with so they get that buff effect from Bejeweled Shrine. And then the third kind of part of this package is Diamond Master, which has a lot of nasty abilities. The first one being its strike ability, just because its strike keyword abilities are always put up first on the board. First of all, it's a 2-play.22 that can't be destroyed by effects. That's just its base stat. When it has when it's strike, which is when it attacks, it can be followers or leaders. Doesn't matter what it's attacking, as long as she is attacking, this effect happens. And it happens before damage happens. It feels like if the follower has Storm and Ward, destroy all enemy followers. So if you give this Diamond Master Storm and Ward, she blows up your enemy's entire board, apart from things that can't be destroyed, which includes her Diamond Master herself. Well, it includes like an enemy Diamond Master, but there's other other followers that also have effects similar to these, so she won't blow those up. But also, once on each of your turns, when this follower gains Storm, give Storm to a random allied follower that doesn't have Storm, and you do the same for Ward. So what this means is you can give Storm and Ward to... Whilst Chirpy only gives Storm and Ward to things that have like low base attack, or low attack at the time when you play it, Diamond Master can give Storm and Ward... Storm specifically, but Storm and Ward is both very good to much bigger followers, and there's a couple of larger follower options in the deck. And then like your final way of giving Storm and Ward to your followers is like a backup for is like another version to get this is Sapphire Priestess, which is a 2-play.22, which has Evolve, give Storm and Ward to another allied follower with 2 attack or less. So you almost always use that Evolve to hit Diamond Master. But there are a few other cases, but that's like your main thing. Also, if you have an amulet in play, which you almost certainly will in this deck, even if it's not the Bejeweled Shrine, it can quite easily be any of your crystallized amulets, any of your crystallized effects. And if you've got that crystallize effect, like 5 crystallizes active, then whenever any other follower in your board attacks, which you'll probably have a few in this deck, you draw a card. So this is kind of like your main way of not only just you give Storm and Ward, another source of Storm and Ward to your Diamond Master or similar cards, or other powerful cards that can be effective. Then there's also a lot of card draw, which is quite powerful. So the deck kind of has a lot of card draw anyway. Like, So then we kind of go through other things. Holy Lightning Bird is another legendary that's also pretty core to the deck. It's a fairly simple one. It's a 6 play point 4/4 Storm, which is alright. It's nothing to laugh at, but the main reason you play it is for its Crystallize effect. Not only because it's just a cheap Crystallize, it's Crystallize 1, so you only need 1 play point to play it. It's got Crystallize 1, Countdown 2, Last Words, deal 2 damage to a random enemy follower, so that's nice board control. But the important thing is it puts the Holy Lightning Bird back into your hand, so you can keep using 1 Holy Lightning Bird Crystallize for as long as you want, unless it gets banished or your hand is full when this resolves, because then it gets burned. And then also, its fanfare is if you've got your 5 Crystallizers, you recover 2 play points, so it's effectively a 4 play point 4/4 Storm. Doesn't have Ward on its own though, that's a thing to keep in mind, so it will not get on its own, it doesn't get buffed by Bejeweled Shrine. But yeah, that's like Holy Lightning Bird, fairly simple. It's played for this, and then you play it like onto the board to actually deal some more damage. And the last and the next probably slightly more important than Holy Lightning Bird, but still, I'd say Holy Lightning Bird is still very mandatory in the deck, is Skullfane the Defiled. Because like that first ability, we'll come back to it later. The Skullfane the Defiled is a bit more of a complicated card, so I'll try and go through it. So the first thing, so his basic stats is a 7 play point 4/4, which is fanfare, destroy all allied amulets. They actually, originally, when this set first came out, the Jeweled Shrine wasn't immune to destruction effects. That was a buff they added later. And so when you played Skullfane, you blew up your own shrine, which was a bit counterproductive. But he also deals 4 damage to all enemies and restores 4 defense to you. So that's like alright, like a 4 play point 4/4 that does that is alright, but then you see he has his Accelerate. It's Accelerate 1, so only 1 play point, where you subtract 1 from the countdown of an allied amulet, which is important in this deck because it means your amulets will trigger faster. And then if that's an amulet that hits 0, you get a Skullfane back in your hand. So you only really want to be accelerating him on amulets that have 1 countdown, unless you're setting up something and have like multiple Skullfanes in hand or something. Because at the end of your turn, if you've played this Accelerate from any Skullfane, doesn't have to be the same Skullfane because it's actually putting a fresh Skullfane into your hand every time, which is important. Then at the end of your turn, if you've played that Accelerate effect 4 times, you subtract 4 from its cost. So it goes down to a 3 cost, and then a 0 after 1 turn, and then a 0 cost after another turn. So that makes that very powerful, especially if you give it Storm because you can of course give it Storm by Diamond Master. So you get this very big swing turn where you play a 0 play point Skullfane for or as even like a 3 play point Skullfane. And you deal 4 damage to enemies. If you've got any countdown amulets on the field, they get blown out. So 1, you get a bunch of you get all their effects early, and 2, they clear out your board for make board space for you to put other things. You deal 4 damage to the enemy's face and heal 4. And then if you give it Storm from Diamond Master, you can then hit face for another 5 if you've got the Crystallize Amulet, or more if you evolve him, but you'll probably have a better evolve target than Skullfane, because you might have well, really, like in that, usually that case, your best target for evo could be anything, because anything will do damage, so it might depend on the situation. Like Diamond Master is a good evolve target because it's immune to destruction effects. Obviously, Sapphire Priestess, if you're using that, it will use your evo if you're giving that Storm. If you're giving Storm to Diamond Master with that. But preferably you want to use Wingy because it's a fanfare and is 1 play point cheaper than Sapphire Priestess. So like, you can do Skullfane, Diamond Master, Wingy, and that's 6 play points for 4, 5, 8, 10 damage without Evo. No, 11 damage. Yeah, 4 and 5 is 9. No, a lot more than 11. 9 plus 3 is 12. 15. 15 damage without Evo on turn 6, whilst also blowing up all enemy followers. You're doing 4 damage to anything that might not... So you're 4 damage to anything first, so they might not even have a board worth to blow up. But you'll probably also get rid of any of their annoying wards. And then you play, and then you have that. So that's kind of like that's the kind of big best combo you have. And if it can be slightly better, because there's a few other options that make this. You also have Magus Jester as a card. It's a nice bronze card that has Crystallize, which is a very simple card. It's 5 play points for a 5/5/2/3 Storm Ward with Fanfare, summon another copy of it. So that's alright. That's like 5 play points for 2/2/3 Storm Wards. And obviously if you've got Crystallize, if you've got a Dual Shrine in play, then that's a lot. That's like 6. That's 2, and that's like 2/3/6 Storm Wards for 5 play points, which is fine. But what'd be good? What it does also have is this Crystallize 1 with Countdown 3, with Last Words summon a single Magus Jester. So that summons just 1, 2, 3, because of course it doesn't proc the Fanfare because it's been summoned by an effect, not played from your hand. So obviously if you have 1 or 2 of those in play, and then before you play Skullfane on your next turn, then you're going to blow up those Crystallizes, you're going to summon a Magus Jester or even 2. Actually no, you only want 1, because if you summon 2 then you run out of board space. So you only want, so that's the thing to consider, is the Dual Shrine does take up a board space, so you've only usually got 4 board slots full at any one time. But yeah, so you'll play your Skullfiend, and you can pop up Magus Gesture as well, and then you play Diamond Master into Chirpy. Diamond Master will always... Whoops, didn't mean to... Whoops, went back too far. We can... Whoops. Was it? Yes, it was this deck. It was this version. But, yeah, so if you have a Magus Jester active, like Crystal Amulet on the field, then you play a 3 play point Skullfane, Diamond Master, Wingy. Wingy gives Diamond Master Storm and Ward, which then gives Skullfane Storm and Ward, and then all you need is an Evo, and that's 20 damage. That's an OTK. So that's kind of like the scariest thing this deck does, is just OTK you on turn 6. That's why it's doing pretty well. But obviously this assumes your opponent doesn't have now anything to stop you. And there's a few other cards that are like... Vadra Champion is another card that's very good with... that's kind of a tech option. It's not kind of necessary, but it's very powerful. Which is simply, it's a 7 play point, 5/5 with Rush and Clash, which means that any time it attacks or is attacked by another follower, you trigger this effect first, which is a very powerful Clash, because it's banish the enemy follower. So off the bat, whenever he clashes with, whenever he attacks an enemy follower, an enemy follower attacks them, they just get banished instantly. So they don't even get to do damage. He doesn't even deal damage. He doesn't take damage because the enemy follower gets banished before that even happens. And what makes him very strong is whenever you play an amulet, which includes Crystallize effects, you subtract the cost from him if he's in your hand. So you can, with the amount of amulets this deck plays, you can quickly make this into a 0-cost card. And then again, you can play that along, give that Storm with Diamond Master for some more damage, or you just use him to control the board and counter things like Artifact Portal, because he banishes rather than just because he banishes them, he can greatly hinder their ability to get their 6 artifact names destroyed. But they do have a fair few ways to deal with him, because Obviously, you can't deal with him via attacking him because he'll just banish them unless you have an effect that makes them immune to being banished. But otherwise, you would generally want to use like removal spells or damage, indirect damage to deal with him. He's like another thing you can add, like, again, that previous power turn I described, he's not as... The thing is, if you play him alongside Skullfane, then you're not guaranteed to give either, like, only one of them will get Storm, because Diamond Master will only give Storm to one thing. So yeah, like, if you're trying to cut the cost in this deck down, you can take out the Vajra champions, but it's really not recommended. I'd probably replace him with some cheap option would probably be... Actually, I'm going to copy this. I am going to go into the deck builder screen now so that I can actually like show some alternatives, because this is one of the cards you can actually... Yeah, I can't make the deck. So if I was going to remove him, if I was going to like try and cut down, I'd probably just replace him with some more cheap banish. Like, it's not great, but it's still... You still kind of want the banish there, so... like, Blackened Scripture is a basic card, so you always have that. So that's probably what I'd replace him with. The few, like, if you have Uranus, but not him, I'd also possibly consider him, because you can get the, Diamond Master does hit neutral followers, so you can use him to... Like, Uranus can be not a bad choice in this deck regardless, just as a weird alternate use. So you could probably, replace... If you have Uranus, because he's a neutral card, and thus you can put in more decks, and honestly he's a very useful card to just have. If you need Banish in your deck, it's hard to go wrong. But yeah, I can see how he can, like, extend your damage a lot. Because he's a 6/6 after he gets that free Evo. But you have to be in that condition of having 20 cards or less to Evo him at all, because otherwise you just can't. And he doesn't have the strike effect when he's not Evo'd. But if you can give him, if you do get into a situation where he does have the Evo, and you do give him Storm from Diamond Master, then he will deal a lot of damage, because he'll deal 3 damage to the enemy leader from his strike effect. But less than 5 cards in your deck is only really going to happen if you get Barhard, but this deck is far too aggressive to really think about even getting Barhard if you're... But it's a possible consideration. Like, he might end up in the deck if that's a thing. But yeah, the other, like, expensive legendary card is Gillenese. He's kind of her invocation effect doesn't really matter in this deck, again, because it's an aggressive deck, so you don't really want to get to turn 10, which is when this will happen, is when her invoke will happen, so we can kind of ignore that for now. But her main thing is she works pretty well with this deck, because she's got 2 attacks, she can be given Storm by Sapphire Priestess and Wingy, and then you can evolve her with her effect that gives +2/-2 to a follower. So you give her Storm, then you evolve her to give her this effect, and that makes her into a 6/2, because she's a 4/4 after Evo. The 6/2 with Drain, and then you have a Bejeweled Shrine in play. When you attack with her, she then becomes a 7/5 with Drain, Storm, and Ward, which is just a very, very powerful option. I just realized you can't actually use Sapphire Priestess in this instance, because you have to evolve her to give Storm and Ward, but that's still very powerful with Wingy. But yeah, Gillenese, if you want, as I said, as an option to make the deck a bit cheaper if you don't have Gillenese, which is she's still worth getting because, again, neutral and a fairly solid card, especially in kind of mid-range slower decks, because she can offer she's a lot of flexibility, and this invoke is basically a late backup win condition, because there's very few people, because Ravenous Sweetness is a 0 play point spell that deals 5 damage to them, heals you for 5 damage, you draw 5 cards, and your opponent discards 5 cards at the start of their turn. It's one of the few effects that can actually make your opponent discard cards. And that's like... that effect is the devastating part that means that usually wins you the game on the spot, because your opponent will then basically have no hand, and they might not have... or have basically nothing unless they've got a board on the... they've already got a board already that you haven't been able to deal with. But yeah, Jillanese is like another good neutral legendary. Because she's... first, her 2-point play point 2/2 with Drain is alright. But the main thing is her evolve, because it gives +2, -2. So that's so to elaborate on that, that's +2 attack, -2 defense. So she can use that to either buff herself to make her a 6/2 Drain, which can use to trade out for some much higher cost followers. So she can on her own deal with like a lot of beefier followers. Whilst also and then that she has Drain that heals you for 6, so she can be a very useful tool against aggro decks. Or you can just use the -2 effect to kill something, like a small thing that might otherwise be annoying to kill, like it might be immune to damage, which that circumvents quite handily. But yeah, I don't really know what you'd replace Jillanese for, because you kind of want something... like I've seen the other deck lists is replacing her with a other versions of the deck list replacing her with Metatron, but again, that's not a legendary. Again, a very useful one. I think I've gone over Metatron before in the when I was talking about puppets, but it's basically 2 play point 1 forward with this nice little fanfare. And ramps if you're going second, effectively. If you evolve her and you're going second. On your turn 4. Usually does not ramp on any other turns, because then... unless your opponent is much lower on play points than you. Or you have a way of play point recovery. So, yeah, so that's like all the legendaries. The rest of the cards are fairly simple. Cursed Maiden is another effect that reduces 1 from the countdown of an amulet, and also... so that's a similar effect to Skullfane's Accelerate, though you can be a bit more liberal with it because she doesn't need them to hit 0 immediately. So like once in each of your turns when an amulet is destroyed, put a random follower with Crystallize or an amulet with Countdown from your deck into your hand. This deck runs no amulets with Countdown, everything is followers that have Crystallize. So she's just a good way of tutoring out for more Crystallized cards to make that reliable, while also accelerating your countdowns to have your effects go off sooner. Spiritual Blow, as I've said, is mostly for the mirror. So you'll basically sacrifice a card on the board, which could be a Bejeweled Shrine of your own if you've got another one in hand. It'll probably be, but also could be like any amulet, like a Thunder God of the Tempest, which is a nice little versatile card. You mostly play him for most of the deck, you play him for the Crystallize, which is a simple Crystallize 1, Countdown 1 that draws you a card when it pops. And again, that's very good with Skullfane, because you can play that for 1, then you've immediately got a amulet with Countdown 1 on that turn that you can then hit with Skullfane. What makes it a bit clunky is he has this Accelerate 3, which is destroy an enemy amulet, which again can be useful. And hey Daku, we're just having a little in-depth analysis of a Crystallize Haven craft. So I'm kind of like trying to keep this short so that people on YouTube will want to watch it. So sorry that it is. He's also a Stormward follower, but he's a 7 play point 1 with no way of reducing his cost, so he's not that. You won't really ever play him as a follower, there's no point really holding on to him. Sometimes he'll be the thing that wins you the matches. Agent of the Gods is another simple Crystallize. You will never play this as the follower. Yeah, that's kind of like the beauty of the kind of digital format of the deck, is you don't have to worry about actual space on the cards. I know Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't really care, it just crammed the space all in there. But now you can literally just have all the words that you want. And it's possibly a bit more manageable because it's, I have not, Daku, I have not. As I said, I'm still going through this deck, so I'll come back to questions in a bit later once I'm finished. But yeah. So Agent of the Gods is a card you will never play for its actual card, because it doesn't really synergize with the deck at all. And it's a 9 cost, so if you're playing this deck, again, I've said many times, it's a very aggressive deck. If you get to turn 9, you're probably having a bad time, and you've probably already lost. But you might not lose. But you probably still won't play Agent of the Gods for 9 unless you're absolutely desperate. But the main thing is you crystallize it. It's got Crystallize 2, Countdown 2, Fanfare, draws a card, so it's a Crystallize that cycles itself on Fanfare, which is nice. And last words, destroy a random enemy follower, so that can be useful. That is, it just keeps the board under control. Helps those things, because it's random targets, you can hit things that have ambush or can't be targeted normally. The hitting things with ambush is important because there's a Cosmos Fang in Forest, which is a nasty follower with ambush that you really can't leave around for a turn. But you can also deal with Cosmos Fang by Diamond Master blowing up all their followers as well, so that is an option. Emerald Maiden is another card played almost exclusively for the Crystallize, which is it's kind of a recurring effect in Havencraft. This is a Sacred Plea was the original form of this, so it was a 1 play point Haven Amulet, Countdown 3, and last words, draw 2 cards. So this is just that in crystallized form, and so it also has this body, which again you probably won't play, but it is kind of useful. It's a 2/4 ward for 6, that's Fanfare summons a 3/5 rush, and whenever another Havencraft follower comes into play, you give it ward. So you probably won't play this, but in a pinch can be quite handy, like, because of course you can give ward to a low-cost Vadra champion or 0-cost Skullfane. Again, you'll mostly only do that in a kind of like desperate situation. Almost not any other time you'll want to play it for the Crystallize, because again, the deck is built around crystallizing, getting your Crystallize count up as much as possible. Right, I think that's the deck. But yeah, it's a very hard deck to kind of. It is an expensive-ish deck. Like, there are more expensive decks, but there are also less expensive decks. And, but yeah, so it's a very aggressive deck. I can't do, as I said, I don't have the vials or the cards to make it, so I can't really show you a little demonstration of it. Because again, you really need the 3 Skullfanes and the 3 Diamond Masters at minimum. 2 Holy Lightning Birds you can probably do. Like, if I was going to try and make this cheaper as an option, I'd take out 1 Holy Lightning Bird. You really want 3, but you can survive with 2. As long as you have at least 1 in your hand, you can loop it with this Crystallize, but it's also very important to get this in your hand early, which is why you really want 3 of them. Yeah, I can see why you'd run 2, but I can also see why you run 3. Like, 2's probably is fine, whilst 3 is, like, you want to be absolutely safe. You want to ensure you have it in your early hand. Then the only other cards you can really cut to make this cheaper is... I'll have a look to see if there's some other options to Jill. I don't know what I can put instead of Jilneys. I'll come back to that in a second. So I'd take out this. Again, Vadra Champions, you'd probably at least want 1, but you can do with 0. It is possible if you're really running on a budget. So if we're trying to cut down its cost as much as possible, that's kind of what you can take out. You don't want more than 2 Spiritual Blows, even if it's an easy way to fill your deck, because it's literally just a tech card for the mirror. Like, it can be useful in other situations, but you're 90% of the time you just want it so you can remove your opponent's Bejeweled Shrine if they're playing the same deck. So Hierophant's Implements is a... I'd say you could probably... we can reduce the cost by... It's not a great idea. I would not recommend this, but you can replace with Hierophant's Implements, but it is strictly worse because it only draws a card and it's tutors. It's not a Crystallize. But yeah, I would... In fact, yeah, I'm going to say that's a really bad idea. I would not run this without 3 Cursed Maidens. She's very important to the deck. So yeah, what can we do to fill up? So to replace Jilanese, I'd probably use Guiding Bellringer Angel. Just because she's a very good 2-drop, especially as a filler. That doesn't mean... and if you do have a lot of cards in your hand, you can give her Storm and then evolve her. Like, you can give her Storm from Wingy, and then evolve her, and that can hit for decently well. Like, again, it's not great because she already has Ward, and Wingy, you want something that doesn't have either so that you get the... you're getting more value out of it. But as I said, if you're desperately trying to reduce the budget... Again, it's also a gold, which, not great. Let's see, what can... Like, Angel of Adjudication is another potential other option. Just as a 2-drop, but it's not a great one. Valerian Painter, really, no. Yeah, it's hard. We're still replacing... Like, maybe an Ambitious Goblin Mage, but there's not really anything in the deck you'd really want to tuck, so no. The 2/2 that evolves with 5 cards in play. Is that a new card? I don't remember that. Oh yeah, Kamiya. Again, another gold. But Kamiya is a decent option. She has Ward. And if you can give her Storm, she's got this. If you can make a decently wide board, she's got this strike effect when she's evoed. I'll explain Kamiya. I'll start from the top. So she's a 2 play point 2/2 ward with fanfare. If you have 3 or 4 allied cards in play, which includes herself. So if you've only got 2 in play and you play her, this effect triggers. You draw a card. But if you're 5, you evolve her instead. These are she evolves instead. These are mutually exclusive, so obviously it's only 3 or 4. If you have 5, she just evolves, you don't draw a card. But her evolve is quite powerful because she has this strike effect, which is she buffs all your other allied followers by 1. So that can make some pretty strong boards. So yeah, if we're replacing a legendary for a gold here, which again, not the best, not the best in terms of getting absolute cheapness. Like another one could be Twin Blade Featherfolk as another. If we're going complete budget, Twin Blade Featherfolk also synergizes with reducing your amulet cooldowns. And then he can be used as removal, but again, not a great option. Like, I'd say Kamiya is the best option for replacing that 2-slot. And then you're replacing Vajra Champion with a couple of Blackened Scriptures. What else did we take? We took out 1 Holy Light Mine, so you could probably just run 3 Blackened Scriptures there. And yeah, I still don't have enough vials to make. Oh, Adherent, do you mean? Yeah, Adherent is another good option. And it's if you at the end of the turn, if you didn't. So yeah, if we're going to Adherent is a good option to use, though it's a bit counterintuitive, I think, because its effect only triggers if it hasn't attacked, and if you want to give it Storm, that stops that effect from happening. So obviously, if you can just play it as a 2/2, that's fine because it won't attack on that turn. But like any later, and it becomes a problem. So I'd much rather run Kamiya as an option there. There, I keep clicking through. Sorry. Yeah, I don't think I get the idea of why you'd want Adherent to save yourself from burst damage, because the damage shield can be quite useful. But I think this deck's too aggressive for that kind of like passive, that kind of defensive play. Ascended Prism Priestess doesn't find anything. That's legendary, we don't want that. But yeah, Kamiya is probably your best bet for replacing Gillenese, but really I'd rather, again, Gillenese is a very good, Gillenese or Metatron, they're kind of interchangeable. You either want one or the other. So like, you could also run Metatron in that two play point slot as well. And that's perfectly fine. And like they're decent crafts because they're as I said, they're very widely used neutral cards. You can put them in a lot of decks. But yeah, if you want to absolutely cut down on your legendary cards, you can't. But again, this is still a fairly expensive deck because you've got 9 legendaries minimum. Well, okay, 11, no, not 9, 7 legendaries minimum. No, 8 legendaries minimum. 8 legendaries minimum because you have to have 3 Diamond Masters, you have to have 3 Skullfanes, and you want at least 2 Holy Lightning Birds. And again, you really want to improve it with the Gillenese or Metatron in that two play point slot. And then Vajra Champion instead of these Blackened Scriptures. One nice thing is, whilst it does have, this is still a lot of gold cards, the Bejeweled Shrine, obviously you get a free set of these Alt-Art Bejeweled Shrines from the event. So make sure to pick those up, because free golds, free animated golds, and you get Bejeweled Shrine that has the cute the girl on it instead of just so unless you would rather have the Bejeweled Shrine that's just nice and pretty on its own. Where is it? Where is it? That's nice and pretty on the own. I don't even have any. I think I liquefied them because I have the. I prefer this one. It's anime. But yeah, so that's a card. This is, you can get Bejeweled Shrines for completely free. Not so much with any others. I know, like this isn't a free one. This is one of the alt-art ones you can pull in the pack, the wingies. But yeah. So I'm just going to save that as slightly. Yeah, that is how you spell slightly. Budget. Crystallize. 2 L's on Crystallize, I think. I don't care if that's wrong. It's my stream, my deck. And yeah, so that was. Sorry if I hit the microphone with that clap. That was. Doesn't even fit on the deck screen, so kind of pointless. Or just slightly budget crystal. So yeah, that was my in-depth deck look for today. Do you want to know how to like play against this deck? It's pretty difficult, really. I'll just put into preview so I can kind of like see. Like, obviously, you can only really remove Bejeweled Shrine itself if you're playing Havencraft and you play Spiritual Blow. That's the only thing that can remove Bejeweled Shrine in the current meta, because I don't think Forestcraft has any Amulet Bounce available. But yeah, the main way you'd play against this deck is kind of, you have to play super defensively. You want stuff that can kind of stop Diamond Master even if it, blows up your board. You don't want to let them get any kind of board sticking at any point because that can really snowball against you. You can beat them by being just more aggressive because the only healing in the deck is from Skullfane himself. So if you can just play a far more, because in the early turns they're not going to be playing. Yeah, you want. Like, in their early turns, they're just going to be playing... This deck just plays Crystallize as an amulet. It does not play followers. It doesn't start playing followers until, like, turn 4 at the earliest. You won't unless so you want to or you can kind of pressure them into playing followers. Like you can pressure them into playing a Sapphire Priestess just as a 2/2 to contest your board. So yeah, you want to have an aggressive board that they can't just remove with Holy Lightning Birds and Agents of the Gods, and in this case, Blackened Scriptures. Because otherwise, the only real follower they'll be playing on the early turns is Cursed Maiden, which is just a 1/1. But you can kind of play wide boards kind of go well against them. So like playing puppets, for example, a good way to deal with them is just going out for a wide board of puppets, preferably with like checking the budget model deck I made last time with the Blossoming Flower Doll to make some wide boards early on. Also, Artifact can make some pretty wide boards with its various cards. So just a quick preview. So like you can kind of hold your own with Vermidia and of course Merciless Voiding. Like Shion's been included as a way to kind of like stop it dead in its tracks because she doesn't take damage from effects, so she doesn't get hit by Skullfane, and she can't be destroyed or banished by effects, so she can't be blown up by the she can't be blown up by Diamond Master. So she kind of just stops that combo. If you nice. But yeah, like Shion kind of, if you're playing up Portalcraft and you have Shion, she does like kind of stop Diamond Master dead in her tracks because they literally have no way to kind of push, they have to trade in to push to kill her. And if you just play her and Evo her, she's just like there being annoying. So that's why a lot of Artifact decks are running Shion. She's also very good against Artifact itself because she's immune to the effect from Full Blast Gunner. And also Ralmia. There's lots of effect damage in this deck. And as I said, there's loads of ways for this deck to kind of like deal with a board without actually trading in, and that's what whilst Shion is a card you have to trade in to kill because she's immune to anything that's anything effect wise. She can only be killed by like actually hitting her with followers. But yeah, so that what's also say it's probably a bit weak to if you can somehow do it. You can probably so the other kind of aggressive deck that kind of works pretty well against them is Fairy Forest Craft, because again it can make a very scary wide board that they can't really deal with, and then you either buff that board with Forest Merchant, or you play Nobilis, and then even when they blow up all your fairies, they then deal 2 points to your opponent, and then they just take a whole load of damage. And worst comes to worst, you can Cosmos Fang their board, and then suddenly they're like, I'm stuck with a full cost, like if they play a Skullfane and they don't quite kill you, and you can play Cosmos Fang, evolve her, and then they're stuck with the full cost Skullfane, because it won't be discounted until the end of their turn. But mostly you'd just be playing like very aggressive early cards like Phantom Bloom Predator and Forest Merchant and just all the little 1/1s, so the fairies and the aqua fairies and all that stuff, to just kind of like pressure them down before they can really do anything, because the deck doesn't have any AoE until its Skullfane turn. Its only board clears are Skullfane and its only board clears are Skullfane and Diamond Master. It has everything else has to be done by like actually playing singular cards. Yeah, obviously I don't have a Handless Blood deck because I don't like playing it, but Handless Blood is also very good for it, because again it's just such an aggressive deck that just kills them before they can do anything really. And they don't have, and again, they're very hard for them to contest Handless Blood's board. Though, on the flip side, they don't really play enough followers for Handless Blood to, like, play some of their kit. So, it can be hard getting to your getting to your handler state, essentially. But yes, okay, I've gotten under time, that's under an hour, so excellent. That will go up on YouTube soon.